Good evening, boobtube.org/chickenwings. I have not posted a video reviewing stuff that I've been up to in a while because I've been doing so much Leafs, lots of Leafs games, lots of gameplay video and stuff like that, but I have been up to stuff, and on a Saturday night with the wife out of town, I thought I have no life, so I may as well do this. So, yes. To start things off, I saw this movie recently. I wanted to see it in theaters badly, but never got around to it. It is the Happytime Murders. This movie is the brainchild of Jim Henson's son, Brian. And for those of you who have lived under a rock your whole life, Jim Henson is the creator of like the Muppets and the Muppet Show and all those weird puppets. This movie takes place in a reality where humans and puppets live side by side in society, and but puppets are treated as like second-class citizens, and the humans don't respect them, and nobody cares what happens to a puppet. Sorry, there's fluff floating around here. So the main character in this film is a puppet detective named Phil Phillips, who sticks up for the little guy and solves crimes against puppets. So in the beginning of the film, we see this puppet female named Sandra come to his office and inquire as to why she's being blackmailed all of a sudden and if he could look into it. As he does, he witnesses a murder from another puppet, and it was a puppet who used to be on this old TV show called the Happytime Gang, and he talks to his brother about it, who was also a cast member on the Happytime Gang, and not long after his brother is murdered. So brought in to help out on the case is a human detective named Connie Edwards, and we find out that years and years ago, these two, Phil and Connie, actually made history teaming up as the first ever puppet human law enforcement team. But they split up because they got into a situation where Phil had to rescue Connie by taking a shot at a puppet, and he missed, and they thought it was because he couldn't kill a puppet, and there was all this controversy, yada yada. And so now Phil's gone and off and done his own detective thing, and that's kind of where they're at. So they have to team up again, and there's lots of animosity between them about what happened. Obviously some unresolved feelings, and from that point onwards, we just witness them solve this mystery. And it's like they say, what is it? No Sesame, all street is some of the taglines, and there's something else too. But it's crazy because it's just like so raunchy and dirty and foul language, and it's filmed like kind of a cop drama slash thriller from the 70s or something. Like it's so weird with the narrative and stuff like that. But it's amazing. It's so fun. It got terrible reviews, but as usual, I like everything. And it's so funny, and it's so bizarre, and it's just hysterical. I was laughing the whole time. So I highly recommend it. Next thing, I showed my son this movie, the original Pet Sematary from 1989, I guess it was, somewhere back then, near 80, yeah, something like that, which is based on a Stephen King novel. And I loved this movie as a kid. I had it recorded on VHS tape, and I used to watch it all the time. So the story is that this family moves from the big city of Chicago to this small town in Maine called Ludlow or something like that, because the father in the family, Lewis, is to become the town's new doctor. And accompanying him is his wife Rachel and their two kids, Ellie, who's like a young girl, and their infant son, God, I forget his name now, Gage. And also making the trip is the family cat Church, who Ellie is a big fan of. She loves her cat. So as they move in, they get settled in their house, and they meet the neighbor across the street, an old kind of weird but kindly man named Judd. And he warns them against the road that separates their houses, that it's very busy. There's big oil trucks going through all the time and flying through at top speeds, so they warn about the cat getting hit because animals get hit there all the time. And Ellie one day notices that in their backyard there's a path leading off into the bushes, and she wonders about it, and so Judd says, well, I'll take you there sometime. So one day they all go down there, and he shows them that it's a pet cemetery, and and not long afterwards, Lewis at work is brought in a guy who's been in an accident, and he can't save him. And then afterwards, he starts having visions from this guy in dreams, and this fellow warns him to not go past the barrier in the pet cemetery. So it's all very weird for Lewis. And then afterwards, not long afterwards, when Rachel takes the kids back to Chicago to visit her parents, Lewis is alone at the house, and Judd calls him up and says, I think your cat's been hit by a truck. And sure enough, Church is dead. And but Judd reveals something to Lewis and takes him on a bit of a trip. It's a trip past the barrier in the pet cemetery. And Judd takes him to an old Micmac burial ground where they bury Church, and the next day, lo and behold, the Church returns home, smelling of nastiness, and not quite himself. He's very hissy and scratchy and a little bit bitey. So Lewis is astounded, and he's also thrilled because now Ellie's not going to be missing her cat, which he was very not looking forward to telling her about that. So so life goes on. The cat's weird, but whatever. And but one day, a much larger disaster strikes when they're all out having a picnic, and Gage gets loose on them while trying to fly a kite, and he also walks in front of a truck, and their infant son is killed. Rachel and Ellie go back to Chicago to kind of be alone and mourn with her family. Well, Lewis stays behind, and he just cannot, he tries to fight it, but he just cannot resist, and he takes Gage to the burial ground and buries him after he exhumes him from his regular grave, of course. And once the witching hour is past, a little baby erupts from the ground, but he is not the same. And events unfold from there, and they are very terrifyingly disastrous. So, cool movie. And I hadn't seen it in years. After watching it a million times as a kid, I hadn't seen it in many, many years. So it was, I had forgotten a lot of, I remembered the basic premise of it and the basic storyline, but I had forgotten a lot. So it was cool to watch it again all these years later. This is also a movie I super wanted to watch, and I finally got around to it. Super Troopers 2. Good Lord. The Broken Lizard comedy troupe have brought us, obviously, Super Troopers 1, Beer Fest, and what was the other one? Club Dread, like this resort movie, and they're ridiculously funny. They're like crazy, stupid comedies. And so basically in the first Super Troopers movie is that there's these 5 Vermont state troopers along with their chief, and they just totally abuse their power and do ridiculous pranks and jokes and stunts, and just generally immature men being, taking advantage of their position in life. And the movie ends when a ride along with a famous celebrity goes all sorts of wrong, and they're all fired. So this movie picks up many years later. They've been kind of doing their own things. They're working in construction now, this mostly, doing some other things as well. But their chief calls them up one day and says, guys, let's do a fishing trip up to Canada. And so they all go, and they arrive, and then the chief reveals to them that they're not really there to do a fishing trip. He's recently discovered that a small portion of Minnesota, or I guess, would it be a small? Yeah, it's the state of Minnesota, but I'm trying to think of which province it borders on. Either Manitoba or Ontario, I don't know. I couldn't really tell from the map they briefly showed in the movie, but a small part of one of those Canadian provinces that hovers over Minnesota, actually a portion of it, a small portion, actually belongs to the U.S., and the border was drawn wrong on maps. And so the mayor of the Canadian town that this land is on has agreed to turn the land over, and so the Super Troopers are given a chance to head there as the U.S. police force and smooth this transition from Canada to U.S. and make these Canadian citizens U.S. citizens now. So they arrive there, and they meet the mayor, Guy Lafranc, and and the first initial meeting does not go well. The three Mounties in the town do not get along with these guys. None of the citizens want them there. They don't want to become Americans, so things don't get off on the right foot. And try as they might, they just can't get a foothold with the people of this town. During their adventures, though, they start to discover caches of drugs and weapons stashed in certain places around the town, and they realize that something is up, and they go about trying to solve this. And they also go about trying to discredit the Mounties and the rival police force to try and make themselves look better. And they do it by dressing up as Mounties and terrorizing people in the town. And it's so funny because they they fake speaking French in a lot of the sequences, and it's just so ridiculous. They go on and on and on, and it's just crazy ridiculous, the words that they're using and the way they're saying it. It's so funny. And so in the end, they unravel this mystery and who the real villain is and what the whole scheme is. And the entire way, it's just super funny. I don't really know. I didn't look at how well this movie was received. But again, I thought it was hilarious. And I learned afterwards that it was actually it was a Kickstarter campaign. I think that raised a couple million to kind of get it started, because these guys didn't know if a second Super Troopers movie would be received well, I guess, both by audiences and by studios wanting to pick it up, right? So that's kind of how it came to be, which is cool. Next thing, I finished Volume 2 of the Power Rangers Turbo TV series. I reviewed the first volume maybe a couple of these posts back, I don't remember. But this 3-disc collection is the last 24 episodes of the series, I think. And in it, there's another kind of change in what's happening. Divatox and her minions, they're always operating from a submarine beneath the waters, but they shift their home base up to a space base on the moon, I think it is. And they kind of keep an eye on Angel Grove and the Power Rangers from there and deploy their forces from there. And then entering the fray is Divatox's brother, who's named General Havoc. He brings his own Zord to play against the Power Rangers. Elgar steals one of the Power Rangers Zords and uses it against them. The Phantom Ranger gets in on the action again and almost perishes. Blue Centurion gets in on the action again. But basically it's the same thing. Divatox and her Piranhatrons and all of her minions trying to take down the Power Rangers. And in the end, there's a cool 2-part episode that ends the series on kind of a cliffhanger, when Divatox finally discovers the Rangers' base and mounts an attack on it, and they destroy the power chamber, so the Power Rangers lose their powers. And but at the last second, they're kind of saved, because Divatox is called away by her bosses, who inform her that they have captured Zordon and defeated him. So in the end, the 4 Power Rangers, because Justin doesn't go, blast off into space to go after her and save Zordon and stuff like that. So that's how the series ends and leads into the next one, which I don't have that series yet. I have the one after that, so I'm not sure if I'm going to start that one now or wait until I can get the one that comes after and watch it first. I don't know what I'm going to do. So but either way, there's going to be a lot more Power Rangers in the future. Next thing, one of my favorite newer book series that I've picked up on is the Skulduggery Pleasant series, and this here is the 10th book in the series, called Resurrection. And although it's the 10th book, it's kind of a reboot on the franchise, because the whole storyline of the original books all wrapped up after the ninth. The 9th story was kind of the last one that ended everything. So this book takes place a number of years later. Valkyrie's been living in the U.S. in Colorado, kind of on her own with her dog, to put the events that happened in Roarhaven and having to kill her own sister and then bring her back to life in order to save the world and defeat Darkess and all that stuff. So she's kind of not been able to come to terms with everything that she's done. and all the deaths that Darkess was responsible for. But eventually she moves back to Ireland, even though she doesn't go to see her family. She's in Ireland, she's back. She's having problems grasping her new powers. But one day Skulduggery shows up and says, give me 24 hours. Come out with me, do our jobs, and if you don't want to do it anymore, you can walk away. But just come with me and give me 24 hours. So she eventually relents, and he fills her in that Roarhaven has changed a lot. It's bigger now. People are allowed to worship whoever they want and follow whoever they want, so long as they don't cause any trouble and do anybody harm. There's a new school in Roarhaven for magical kids called Coravel Academy. The place is growing. China is the supreme Grand Mage now, and she's pretty powerful. And Skulduggery's kind of now off on his own. He's still affiliated with the Sanctuary, but he's pretty much free to do whatever he wants. And he informs her that there's always been rumors for a long time of something called the Anti-Sanctuary, a group of evil wizards that have been plotting against the sanctuaries of the world for years. But they've never been able to get any names and find any leads. But now they've kind of pinpointed that there must be somebody at Coravel Academy at the school who is recruiting young people to join up. So Skulduggery and Valkyrie go to the school and recruit a, I guess, what would you call him? An unsuspecting kind of kid named Omen Darkly. He's unsuspecting because his brother Augur is destined by prophecy to play a big role in defeating the next big disaster that's supposed to come along. Whereas Omen, because of Augur's elevated status, is kind of the kid who doesn't exist. Everybody's focused on Augur, and Omen's just kind of in the background. Nobody notices him. He can just kind of blend in and just be nobody. And that's just what Skulduggery and Valkyrie need. They need somebody to be the eyes and ears at the school to find out who is recruiting these kids and who the kids are. So Omen gets involved, and despite his kind of lack of confidence and lack of ability and lack of experience and lack of any sort of accomplishment in life, he actually proves pretty adept at getting into situations and finding stuff out and getting himself out, most importantly, of the situation. So eventually they find out that there's a strange or a mysterious guy named Lethy or something like that, who's leading this charge, and they kind of unravel the mystery from there and eventually sort it out to some degree. Lethy's plan is to revive an evil wizard woman named Abyssinia, who Skulduggery knows quite well, and knows that if she came back it would not be great news, and he's bringing her back to start a war with the mortals that the wizards will have to win and take over the world. And so Skulduggery and Valkyrie and Omen and all their new friends have to stop that from happening. So great book. I'm glad there's more coming. There's one more that's gonna soon be published in paperback. Sorry, I'm so tired. And it's gonna be out in paperback soon. It's called Midnight, so that'll be next on my list, hopefully, of the Skulduggery books to read. And the last thing, which I don't have a box for because I downloaded it many years ago, is the original Mega Man game on the Nintendo Entertainment System, which I downloaded to my Wii. It's funny, I don't have any Mega Man games originally on Nintendo on the cartridge that I had as a kid. I had so many friends that owned the various Mega Man games and everybody loved playing them, that whenever I went to somebody else's house, we'd always, well, let's play Mega Man. So I kind of never had the need. I always got other games because it was like, well, I'll just go to Simon's house and play Mega Man, you know? So, but even though it's probably arguably my most favorite series of all time, I never had any of the games. So I've changed that. I've downloaded them all, of course, but recently we beat the original Mega Man on the NES, and if you don't know Mega Man, for shame. The story is these two doctors, Dr. Light and Dr. Wily, were kind of research partners, and their focus was robotics. And the plan was to make robots that would help improve the world, help people get stuff done, that sort of thing. And somewhere along the way, Dr. Wily went a bit squirrely, a bit evil, and he reprogrammed some of these robots to be evil and help him take over the world. So Dr. Light, saying, I can't let that happen, had this robot assistant named Rock, and he reprogrammed him to be a combat robot, and dubbed him Mega Man. And so Dr. Light deploys Mega Man against Dr. Wily's forces to stop them all and save the day. So the original format in the first Mega Man game, it was a little different, but not much. There were 6 robot master bosses: Gutsman, Cutman, Electman, Iceman, Fireman, and Bombman. So this was kind of cool at the time, because this game was released in 1987, so it was an early one. But when you first open up the game, the menu, you can choose which boss you want to play first. So you can pick one of the 6, go through its stage, and then defeat the boss. And then when you defeat the boss in Mega Man, you then gain a weapon based on his abilities. And the key to beating Mega Man is that every boss in the game is really hard to beat when you're using just your default weapon, the Mega Buster, or any of, or most of the other of the earned weapons that you get by beating bosses. But there will always be one weapon that you can earn from a boss that another boss will be like highly vulnerable to, and it's amazing how easy it is to beat one of the bosses usually when you have the right weapon, compared to the gruel that it will be if you don't. So that was always kind of the puzzle, like, okay, which order do I do these bosses in? And once you found it, it was easy, but it could take a long time trying to figure it out. Of course, now with the internet, you can just go on and look, and which order do I do these in? But that was the trick to the Mega Man game back then. And then just when you've beaten all 6 of the bosses, you then have to go to Wily's castle, where you play all the bosses again, and then eventually run into Dr. Wily and defeat him, and that's the end. So it's such a fun game. It was done by Capcom, and Capcom is easily, I think, the best video game producer out there. They're a couple close to it, but their games are always bright, colorful. The graphics look great. The music's amazing. The gameplay is always good, and they just always have these cool games. Like Mega Man was just a cool, innovative kind of game. And then from then on, they kept that same basic formula for all the future games, but they would add stuff to it, and that sort of thing. And it's just I'm playing Mega Man 11 right now, the one that was just out for PS4 and Switch and stuff, and it's just as much fun as ever. So, but yeah, beat the original Mega Man game with my buddy Simon, and it was highly enjoyable the entire way through, and there will be more Mega Man games for me to talk about in the future as well. So that is all I have for now, but there will be more to come in the future, and there will be probably another one for the Leafs tomorrow morning, and probably more gameplay to come tonight, because I am a gaming nerd and I have no life. So see you soon.